All right, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing today? Everyone doing good? All right, sounds good. Day 3, holy smokes. This is like, I love day 3 at Summit because everyone's like just so like fired up and good energy, but also like, you know.
Sad.
Yeah, like final push, so. All right, we have an awesome panel here today. My name is Mike Marriner. I'm co-founder, president of Roadtrip Nation. For those of you that don't know Roadtrip Nation, we're one part media, one part education nonprofit. We're part of the Strata Education Foundation. We have about 85 employees and 7 green motorhomes. The 7 green motorhomes go across America and interview people in different careers all across America. Then we produce a variety of different content and stories from those experiences. We have a national series on PBS in over 70 million households every year. We have partnerships with half of all U.S. public high schools. And we have a range of amazing partners, including states like South Carolina and philanthropic organizations like the Gates Foundation, who we work with to co-design and launch many of these storytelling initiatives. So today we have 2 great examples of those storytelling initiatives and really trying to demonstrate the importance and the power of narrative change and storytelling, and especially amplifying and centering on learner voices. So today on the panel we have 3 amazing panelists. We have Ellis, who's the Senior Program Officer from the Gates Foundation. We have Susie Shannon, who's the CEO of the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness.
It's a mouthful. We just say SC Compete.
SC Competes.
Yeah, competitiveness is too difficult to spell.
SC Competes. And we have Willie Wittezehler, who's the creative director at Roadtrip Nation. So, and fun facts about Willie, he's been at Roadtrip Nation for like 15 years. I think he started as an intern. We like paid him in fish tacos, and now he basically runs our whole creative team at Roadtrip Nation. So he's here to kind of talk about some of the storytelling formats we use. So, all right. So Isa, let's start with you. So, I think when people think of the Gates Foundation, they probably don't think about storytelling that much. They think like data, and I mean obviously. Data is important, all that stuff is really important, but like, can you share this a little bit about like Gates' evolution over the last few years? And Isa leads the Pathways portfolio at Gates Foundation, which evolved out of a portfolio called the Equitable Futures Initiative, which is kind of interesting too. Do you mind just like talking a little bit about that?
No, can everyone hear me? This is well, one, great to see all of you, and thank you for choosing to be with us this afternoon. So a couple of different things. So yes, with the Gates Foundation, I don't think folks often think about us they think of us as being very data-driven, but when they think of data, they often think about numbers, right? They don't often think about the stories behind the numbers and the people behind the numbers. And so that's something that was really important to us as we were developing out our education and employment pathway strategy. Was we could have started with the data, and yes, we looked at the data in terms of like, what is the data telling us about Black, Latino, and young people experiencing poverty? Where are they? What are the opportunities that they have access to? What are the opportunities they don't have access to? All the things, right? Because there's lots of research out there. But we thought that we actually needed to be in communities, and we actually needed to speak to and hear from young people and ask them those questions directly to really understand the story behind the story. So we partnered with a number of organizations. One is Goodwin-Simon, Wonder Strategy for Good, a number of organizations that helped us first gather that information. And we went to 40 different communities across the country. We did focus groups, we did interviews, you name it, asking the question, what matters to you? When you think about your future, and being very intentional around the questions that we ask. When you think about your future, what comes to mind? What are the opportunities that you see? What are the opportunities that you wish you had? All the things you can possibly. And I had an opportunity to sit in on a number of those different interviews. And it was one thing, there was a lot of things that resonated. I would say 2 of the things that resonated is that for us was that young people actually know. They are very confident about what they see in terms and what they want, right? What they may not know is how to access certain opportunities, but there is some clarity around what are the things they want to do and what's the life that they want to have. And that came through in the interviews, and what was really clear is that using the word career over the term job, like that was very clear. Do not use job, but talk about career. It was also really clear that they care deeply about family. And they wanted to create a life for themselves and their family that included economic opportunity, economic mobility. And it wasn't from a deficit perspective. It wasn't from the perspective of, we don't have certain things now, so I'm aspiring to acquire those things. They just holistically just wanted to be able to create a life where they can create for themselves and their family. So it was really enlightening, because the data oftentimes, the way the data is told and reported is often from a deficit standpoint. And so the fact that we went out into communities and actually heard from young people, we realized in developing this strategy, we really need to think with the orientation of how do we continue to gather stories, because it's not a one moment in time gathering of stories. How are we actively, regularly gathering stories? Who are those partners who can help us do that? Hence, Roadtrip Nation, right? And then how do we use that information as the most actual important data point in informing our strategy? Because the reality is that we all do prioritize the data that we receive, and we've decided that the data that we gather from young people directly is actually the most important data that we're gonna lean into. So, yeah.
And yeah, Willie, so yeah, specifically we worked in Texas with ISA, where we essentially deployed like our Roadtrip Nation storytelling crew, and like, you know, we co-designed road trips essentially around certain themes and places, and it was like, this was interesting because it was near peer interviews, so we had students interviewing other peers. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the format and how you kind of like design the storytelling framework for it?
Yeah, I mean, I could back up and talk about our process just in general of like, you know, gathering these stories, which at the heart, you know, is really about like humanizing and just giving faces and names to these sometimes really complex issues. Like when we're talking about narrative change, big picture around like post-secondary education, like who is at the center of that? Who are the folks who are actually going to be impacted by these things? Is kind of like our first mission when we step in, is to, you know, we put together a creative brief that will maybe on a persona level kind of capture like who these folks are that we're hoping to represent. But once you have that target audience in mind, then it's a matter of like, okay, well, where are they? And that's where, you know, the Gates Foundation was super helpful in connecting us to groups on the ground in Texas who are working with these young folks, and getting in contact with them, and then truly like empathy-driven, coming in and just listening and creating relationships and spending time with these young folks to get to a point where, because more often than not, in our work, these aren't camera-ready personas or anything that we're going to be profiling. We're really striving for authenticity. So getting to a point of trust and understanding, and they're bought into what this big picture project is all about, and they know kind of why their story is being shared and who is reaching out to impact, to where that vulnerability is there, and you could capture an authentic story. And I know we're gonna probably hit play on some clips in a minute, so all of this can kind of come to life for you all. But from there, it's really about co-creating those profiles of young people, because at the end of the day, I see our role in this as just making sure to center the voices of the folks who are going to be impacted by, you know, all the work that we're doing in these conversations, and video just being one of the kind of shortcuts to that, you know, because there's not that many avenues to then like ensure that the young people who are actively trying to decide about what their paths are going to be, like have a voice in the conversation. So kind of that's the value, or that's the cornerstone for us, is like, if we can create a real moment with this young person, we can profile what's truly on their mind, what questions are burning inside of them. The value in that kind of long term is going to be really profound. So I'll get around to more of that later. I always just want to like hit play or start telling you all examples and stuff, but I think there'll be some time and space for it.
Let's do it. Why don't we hit play on the first one? This will be one of the videos that we saw that we worked on in Texas with Gates Foundation, and in terms of like what you said around like listening, like one of the burning questions from youth was like, is college worth it? Like, is college worth it? It's so expensive, and obviously a lot of people in this room would say, yeah, but there's lots of different types of college, and I think that's one of the problems in America is we have this like very uniform sense of like post-secondary pathway, traditional expense, but there's so many different types of reskilling training. So we were, as part of the storytelling, we were trying to shift mindsets and narratives around what post-secondary means and to help young people see all the different pathways that exist for them. So, and to do it in the context of a very specific area like the Permian Basin, where there's very specific challenges and very specific nonprofit groups working there that we can kind of build storytelling around. So this is just one video asset that came out of that initiative, and then we'll play that and then we'll shift over to South Carolina.
If you're in high school, you're probably dealing with some big questions. Is what I'm doing worth it? Is college worth it? What should I do after high school?
Growing up, you're always told you have to go to college, you have to go to college when you're younger. I feel like college is like, have to be the answer, like you have to go, I guess.
Since the dawn of time. Okay, no. For a really long time, high schoolers have been pressured to go down one set path, the path to college. But what else is out there? And how can you pick an educational path that will help you get the skills and work experiences you need to create the life you want? Here at Roadtrip Nation, we've talked to lots of people who've navigated life's twists and turns. And what we learned is, if you want to start building a fulfilling life and career after high school, you just need to find the path forward that's right for you. Certifications, certificates, what's the difference? Certifications help you meet the industry requirements for a certain career. They're often required if you want to pursue a career in healthcare, cosmetology, and many more fields. Certifications put an emphasis on job training, often requiring you to complete a certain amount of hands-on hours trying out a career, and they usually take only 2 years or even less to complete.
I've always really gravitated towards animals. By the time I was 18, I realized, okay, I want to be working with animals. I want to do this full time. I think that my parents were a little bit skeptical about me getting a job so young, but there are some programs that are around 8 months. So I'm working on getting my vet tech certification. That's an associate's degree. And then after that, you have licensing. But the primary form of education that I've had is that hands-on experience.
Obviously, college is still a great option for a lot of people, but it's not a do or don't, and you definitely shouldn't treat it as the default route. Because no matter what you're dreaming up for your future, there are tons of rewarding paths out there that will help you get the skills, training, and education you need to get to where you want to go. It may feel like the decisions you're making right now are gonna decide the rest of your life, but education is a lifelong thing. This is just the first step. Right now, you have the opportunities to try out different careers, build skills, and make connections through your education. But there's always room to pivot and grow, or even start a whole new journey. Bottom line, there's a path out there that's worth it, and just right for you.
And you know what, Mike? I realized just some nuts and bolts on that for some context. Like that is an overview video at the top of a site that's really for students in Texas to learn about what post-secondary options are out there for them. But all those faces you were seeing were other students that we did individual profiles on and like deeper dives into how they were navigating choices, et cetera, and can all be seen on that site as a way for, in that near peer and peer-to-peer way, for young people to see how other folks like them in their area are navigating this stuff and making decisions about post-secondary. So yeah, this is a little bit of like an intro video that, you can then go deeper, or the young folks can then skip to let me find those community college students and hear how they're talking about it. Let me see some students who went to 4-year, et cetera. So.
All right, and so Susie, South Carolina. So, similar like place-based storytelling strategy, but like from the perspective of like an actual state agency. Can you share with us a little bit, like when we first met? I just want to acknowledge Elizabeth Kovacs in the room too. She was like our amazing champion in South Carolina, working with Susie as well. She's like incredible. And when we first started working with Elizabeth and Susie, it seemed like there was a real interest in like kind of developing a more 21st century narrative of like what pathways look like in the state of South Carolina, and trying to like really inspire, especially emerging from COVID, where a lot of young people were still like shell-shocked, stuck, mental health issues, trying to get like students looking forward, thinking about their futures again. Can you talk a little bit about like in South Carolina, like what made you so interested in like doing this?
Well, first of all, thanks for doing the shout out to Elizabeth. Been an incredible partner with us, and we've got more work and more fun that we're going to be taking on with Roadtrip Nation, which we'll talk about a little bit later. First of all, I just want to say there's amazing content this week. Usually when I get asked into a room is to complain, right? Is to opine on challenges and issues that we're all facing when we're seeing workforce compression challenges in all states, all industries, all companies, all departments, right? We know we were not alone in facing either, some of the residue coming out of COVID, or just the fact of our own economic approaches that we were taking within the state. So, and by the way, I have to have a crutch, and I might throw out a couple of stats. So I told Mike, I said, I'm going to have something on my lap. It's just something, and I hope I don't slap anybody because I tend to be a very animated speaker, or I just don't know how to speak to begin with. But the fact that I'm using a digital device for the very first time, just to have some sort of crutch notes sitting here, because usually I'm just sort of dragging up a chiseled stone tablet up to the stage. So this is sort of an exciting moment for me. So I think for us, South Carolina is a state of about 5.3 million people, only sitting within about 30,000 square miles. We are historically, or had been historically, an agrarian textile economy state, with some tourism slapped in primarily along the eastern seaboard of our state. But obviously there was a big shift a couple of decades ago, and we had to shift with it, right? And so I think what we're seeing is we're doing a better job of diversifying our economic portfolio. We're seeing an explosion of economic activity within the state. We actually have had, I was telling someone earlier, Brian, that we've had 3 record announcements, each breaking the preceding record, and all in the last 2 quarters. And with that, obviously, is going to come from the demand of a lot of jobs. And so as we've sort of shifted from sort of how we used to look from an economic foundation into more of advanced manufacturing, we've got 3 auto OEMs, 2 aerospace OEMs. I knew Elizabeth was going to correct me if I kept that sitting out there. So we've got 3 auto OEMs and 2 aerospace OEMs. And Charleston's not just the number 1 destination in the world year over year for people to go hang out and play. It's also a tech center and hub. And we're seeing other emerging, vibrant, high-octane centers and hubs of activity also around our state. So when you've got the confluence of all those things, and we've got in-net migration of population, but we're not moving, that line's not moving fast enough. And honestly, from a natural standpoint, those numbers are going down, but we do have a number of people moving in the state. We're also very attractive to retirees, so we're looking at how to push those back in. And so I think for us, what could be better of bringing awareness, bringing exposure, of having people tell stories and be inspired by each other. And there's some mutually synergistic pieces in there too, because there was a reason I made a reference to our more chronologically further down the line population. I'm barreling in that direction myself at the moment. But it's when you've got these young people who are exposed to those with life experiences and being able to learn from those and get inspired by those, and in return, you have others within these young people's orbit also getting inspired, right? So that's a lot of magic that's happening. And just knowing what we could leverage with the Roadtrip Nation storytelling and pulling in a beautiful mosaic of Alexis and Emily and Russell into creating their own stories, as well as hearing from the stories of others, for us, that's a catalytic starter, right?
Well, let's show everyone what we're talking about. So yeah, why don't we push play on the South Carolina road trip trailer, Leap and Grow. This debuted on PBS late last year and is now broadcasting across the country in 50 million households. So yeah, we can push play on the South Carolina road trip.
I've always been a wanderer. It always seemed kind of harder to find where I fit.
I'm always trying to help other people, and I'm not like focusing on what Alexis actually wants to do, you know?
I just want to be happy, and I don't really know what that looks like yet. Today we're going to talk to Ed Curry. He's the founder of Pucker Butt Pepper Company.
We're cutting up a Carolina Reaper.
I don't even know. I'm doing it no matter what, so.
Now chew it up really well, because if you put that chunk in your gut, then you're going to have a real...
Ew! We're going on a road trip across South Carolina.
To interview different people who do what they love.
To learn about how they got there, and also get to see the South Carolina in all its glory.
I'm kind of scared to drive an RV, but it's okay to be scared.
Part of me wants to say I have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm throwing myself into it.
We have a lot of industry in South Carolina, and I'm excited to explore that on the trip.
People are coming here because there's opportunities, and a lot of these people that are coming have different skill sets than what we'd seen 20 years ago.
I do hear negative things, I do see negative things, but I don't let it steal my joy because I love what I do.
You have to always be true to you and what you want to do and what you love to do. Eventually, the truth of who you are is gonna come.
I feel good. I think I'm kind of loosening up. I don't like stepping out of my comfort zone, and I've done a lot of that the past 3 weeks.
It really makes me realize that if I don't want to be in a situation, I'm gonna have to be the one that gets up and goes somewhere else. No one else is gonna do it for me.
My perspective on life has changed throughout this whole trip. I learned that you can look at any situation and turn it into something helpful.
Okay. For me, that's infectious, and every time I see it, it's like seeing it for the first time. And can I just say that we launched this, or rather we kick-started it, right, at a live NASCAR racetrack in South Carolina, where we had our governor speaking and having fun crawling around in the RV and getting to know these 3 young South Carolinian road trippers. And by the way, when that RV took the race laps through the tunnel.
We weren't sure it was going to fit. I was
Yeah.
like, I was driving it. I was like, I think it's going to fit through the tunnel. I'm not sure. With the Secretary of Labor sitting shotgun.
Yeah.
And the governor was in the pace car in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah. But that green RV took to those race laps like it meant business. That was a lot of fun.
There's no bank though, which is important. There's like at some raceways there's like a bank on the thing, but I was like, but they're made for like lower center of gravity vehicles, not like a motorhome. So, but I mean, I think that was what was cool for us doing a road trip in a place like South Carolina, where you have the state behind it, is that you can really like. The coalition building that you all did around it was so powerful. And like when we showed up at that launch event at Darlington, it was like the governor was there, the Secretary of Labor, all the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, all the local nonprofits that was there. It was like a very community-based thing that everyone was around. And it was like, and the local PBS station, PBS South Carolina, like in a way that would have been hard to do nationally. Like we learned a ton. I mean, same in Texas working with the Gates Foundation. Like Gates obviously is a national, global philanthropic machine, mass, but they're working in places like, the Permian Basin. I think that was a big learning for us in both of these projects, is like the power of place-based partnerships and building storytelling around local coalitions that already exist and local nonprofits and looking at it as field building. And I think what you and Elizabeth did so well was the galvanization of all of these groups around it. And something as simple as a road trip that can mobilize all these different pieces. And now, they've brought the Department of Education to the table. We're going back to South Carolina with the RVs, and we're doing these screening tours at high schools all across the state of South Carolina, trying to get South Carolinian students to kind of think about their futures and look at all these broad pathways that exist in South Carolina. Can you talk a little bit about the coalition building around it? That was something that you took us to school on big time. Was how did you network that across the state and bring that to life?
So our former Secretary of Commerce, I think, probably helped originate this some years ago about a Team SC approach, right? How do we, so that was fomented some years ago of how do we take these different state agencies, these different private nonprofit groups, these different industries and these companies and others, and we say, okay, we're going to embark on this collective impact model. We know you're going to come in with your individual aims and angles, but when you come in the door, we are Team South Carolina. And so there's been a lot of that that's been nurtured through the years, and we've actually put it into practice and to play. And so when we get to the South Carolina Roadtrip Nation launch, we didn't have to listen for the dim, faraway cosmic hiss of the universe of what to do, right? The stars had already lined up and the magic was there. And so it honestly didn't take any convincing. It was just, hey, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. These are all of the stakeholders and constituencies that are inside. And that was the thing, right? It was inclusive. No one was left to feel left out or not made a part of this journey with us. And that was the name that we actually come up with a couple of years ago, was the South Carolina Workforce Journey Initiative. And Roadtrip Nation was, the primary piece of that. And so it was inviting everyone kind of, metaphorically into the RV with us, and let's go on this journey together. On behalf of not just our young South Carolinians, right? That's the feel-good hook. But the fact that all of those constituencies and stakeholders would be benefiting directly, right? We knew from each one of those perspectives what was important to them.
Yeah, you really felt it too. That was really special feeling that you it was even though you're South Carolina competitiveness, it was not very competitive, between the agencies. It was very working together. And same with Gates, and the way that you all approached this with us, I remember in the very, very beginning of the partnership, you're this has to be we see this as field building, which we had never thought about our work in that way before, And you all were super strategic and all right, don't just go out there and produce random stories here and there across Greater Permian Basin in Texas, but let's work with grantees who are already doing college access work on the ground, but who don't have 45-person production departments like Roadtrip Nation does to help. They're so focused on college access and doing the work that they do, but they don't have that muscle tissue to build storytelling. So we worked with Gates grantees and kind of became their storytelling thing. Can you talk a little about that stitching together that you all did, and kind of how the pieces fit together really interestingly?
Yeah, so we have this hypothesis, but for pathway intermediaries, there won't necessarily be, there's not necessarily an incentive for K-12 post-secondary and employers to work together in places. So there are a lot of well-meaning people doing work in very much isolated ways, but oftentimes there is an entity that exists within a place regionally that's decidingly saying, I'm going to be the champion to help bring those entities together around a shared equity goal. I'm going to be the convener. I'm going to be the broker of relationships. I'm going to try to understand what each of these entities want and how they can work together, all in service of creating more equitable pathways. And so with us, we fund a number of intermediaries across the country, pathway intermediaries across the country, helping to build their capacities around partnership building, around data collection and use, around a number of different areas. And one of the things that's been elevated for us is the storytelling and like strategic comms piece. Like these organizations are trying to develop programs, design programs, facilitate partnership across the actors, and also trying to tell the story at the same time, and that's hard, right? So they're trying to build a proof point while they're also trying to do all the other things, and so we realize it's a capacity that we need to build and help build, and oftentimes it takes time, right, to find the talent, build the internal capabilities to do that, and so for us, Roadtrip Nation already does that, right? And there are great examples in South Carolina, in California, in New York, all over the country and globally of what Roadtrip Nation has been able to do in terms of helping to tell the place-based story. And so what if we partnered Roadtrip Nation with these community organizations, right, to help them build that capacity so that they can do that, right? And so that's what we pretty much did, right? So the road trip team is working with 9 different organizations across the country, one being the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin, one of these pathway intermediaries trying to do all the things but doesn't have the capabilities to be the storyteller. And so it's one of my personal favorite story. There's a lot of interesting stories that we learned about the young people and the learners and how they think about possibility and how they think about possibility in their region. Because it's a region in which many young people decide to leave because they don't think possibility there's a real opportunity for mobility where they are. But this organization, Education Partnership for the Permian Basin, is like, there's a plethora of opportunities, but our local young people aren't accessing them, right? Because they don't know about them. But yet we have transplants coming from all over the country, all over the world, accessing these opportunities that are full-time jobs, well-paying jobs, jobs that provide stackable credentials, because employers that actually pay for professional development, but then these transplants are getting these opportunities and then they're staying for 2-3 years and then they're leaving, right? But what about the people who are right in the community, who are invested in the community and want to stay in the community? So that's the thing that often comes up too. There's this idea that young people often want to leave, and unfortunately, too many young people are having to make this false choice of, I either stay and be close to family or friends, or I have to leave for opportunity, right? And oftentimes it's because they don't know about the opportunity that exists there, and employers don't know that there's talent actually in these places. And so you have an organization like the Education Partnership for the Permian Basin that's helping to bridge that gap between employers knowing that there's incredible talent there, as well as the young people knowing that you don't have to leave and go to, which are also fabulous places, but you don't have to go to Dallas or Austin or Houston, right, to these other places. You can actually stay here, make a life for yourself, and still be close to your family. So for us, it's for those organizations like the Education Partnership of the Permian Basin, and there are many, there's a number of them. There are like 190 plus of them across the country who are actively doing the work but don't have the capacity. And so for us as a national foundation, that's where we see our role is, right? So one is elevating the really great proof points so that others see, look what's possible. And then 2, helping to build that capacity, providing the technical assistance, and helping to create that partnership between a national expert in storytelling with these local organizations so that they have that capacity. And then when Road Trip creates the story, they can leverage it as much and as far as they want to, but they also then have built their own talent base within their organization to start doing that themselves. Yeah.
Right, and the rights are shared. We're a nonprofit, so we're not trying to like the local nonprofit groups also get access to all the content. They can leverage it and share it. And any questions from the audience? I have like a ton more questions here, but we can like open this up and make it less linear. Anything percolating? What's up, Ken? Yep.
Did it take oops. I'll stand up too. Hi, Mike. Laura with UCMC Group. We did a call a little bit ago. So how long did it take from start to finish for the South Carolina initiative to kind of from ideation to through the event?
It was coming out of COVID, so it was definitely like that was like Elizabeth. I remember as we were like I was like working out of my camper in the back of my truck, because our office is closed, and but it was about. It took a while to kind of like pull the concept together, and then it was about 7 to 8 months from green light to actual road trip, and that period is probably the most important because we're doing all the creative development. Willie leads the team through a creative treatment development with like all the parties. We spent a lot of time up front getting like the verbiage right, the narratives, the secondary narratives, just being really thoughtful on, and every project is so different. Willie also led a road trip we did focused on military veterans years ago, so it's like every theme is its own thing. So the 7th month is key, and that's the period where you select the road trippers, which is probably the most important part of the entire project, because any Roadtrip Nation road trip is always centered on the student road trippers and their experiences, and they have to have a seat at the table in terms of their experience, who they want to be interviewing. And then that road trip happens around month 7 or 8, maybe month 9 if we have a little more breathing room. And the trip itself is usually around a month or so. And then, it's very much like a 21st century media model. So there's like different content being released at different points. Like a road trip spins off lots of different types of content, like content for South Carolina high schools, content for South Carolina PBS, content for, all different. It just kind of depends on the project. So.
Yeah, the one thing I would add in there is the window between doing all that fact-finding and creative brief development and understanding kind of what the core messages are and what all we want to see represented, and actually hitting the road, because that time is this somewhat unseen, I think really critical moment where you're actually building relationships with these young folks in the area who are going to ultimately be the messengers for these stories. And so you're planning the road trip with them, you're identifying folks that they're interested in talking to and interviewing, as well as just building out their capacity to be ready to, be on camera telling their story, and just like I was saying earlier, get the buy-in for the whole project. So that like window of time, which is really all about like empathy-driven character building, pre-production. It's not necessarily about the logistics of like camera crew, et cetera. It's really about the behind the scenes, just like human aspect of it. So yeah.
That's the big part of the road trip storytelling model is like, we actually have to unlearn a lot of the people that we hire from film schools and stuff, because most filmers coming out of film school, they learn all these things like the cast crew barrier, and it's like if you're working with especially students from underrepresented backgrounds, come from tough back, you can't just be like, all right, restart again, tell them again, and it's the opposite of the cast crew barrier. We're here to help them have a transformational experience and be partners with them in their experience and help them find a degree of powerful vulnerability, and Willie just is brilliant in that and creating the whole. The talent development at Roadtrip Nation behind the storytelling is like a whole other thing. So we won't go into that because we'll take all day.
But like 30 seconds, I just want to add, because a lot of this panel has been like, and this is what Roadtrip Nation does. I really truly believe that folks, like pretty much everybody that's here who's really tuned into and passionate about the work that they're doing has the capacity to do storytelling in a similar vein. One thing I literally say to all of the producers and directors who work on our stuff is this metaphor of you can't ice a cake until you've baked it, and all of that foundational work of understanding like what the story is that you're trying to foster, and then getting the right people in the right places and creating those relationships. That's the baking of the cake. High production value, lighting, good audio, whatever, that's all the icing, but you can't put that on until you have that cake baked. So I feel like the things that you all are tuned into and the relationships you have, especially if you're, embedded in these communities of the folks that you're doing work to impact, like that's 90% of telling stories like this. And then honestly, if you capture that and you're really, intentional about curating that, there's a lot of forgiveness about the actual production value of the story that you tell now. So many people are so used to seeing social media, stuff captured on phones, et cetera. So I also just love to promote the idea of like, you don't need, a huge production crew to come helicopter in. In fact, we've been partnering more and more with young people to produce their own stories. I've done whole profiles where we never even got to fly out and meet them, but rather helping them understand like what the beats of their story may be, and then having them capture a home tour or talk about what it's like to be learning, virtually right now, et cetera, and they can do it themselves. So yeah.
That's perfect. I was going to ask you each, like, what was your last, bits of advice for the audience from like what you've learned from a storytelling, place-based perspective? And Willie, that's the perfect thing. So Susie and Issa, any last bits of advice like for the audience on what you've learned throughout these initiatives from a storytelling perspective?
I'll just say that we've seen firsthand through our experience that the storyteller not only changes their own life, but they change the lives of those around them, and that's very powerful.
I would say a lot of people attending this convening are coming up with solutions without talking, engaging, and partnering with young people. If you want a really good story, talk to young people. They can tell you the story about their past, their present, and how they see their future. And they're the best storytellers when it comes to peer-to-peer storytelling, right? And they're the biggest motivators of their peers. Listen to young people, engage young people. They have the best stories.
Just drop the microphone right there. That was perfect. All right, well, let's just end with that. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll stick around for a little while.